Hello, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. My name is Kelly Oliver, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Animal Health Planner for the Kansas Department of Agriculture. And welcome to the first Secure Food Supply webinar of 2023. I appreciate you taking time today for this webinar focused on the foot and mouth disease virus. For the next 60 minutes, we will take a deeper dive into introducing you to the foot and mouth disease virus. This virus is so important to the livestock industry, not only in Kansas, but nationwide, as it is deemed a high consequence disease that will impact our industry greatly. At the Kansas Department of Agriculture, we strive to protect our state's largest industry, as we know this virus will be detrimental to our producers in the food supply chain. Before the session begins, a couple of housekeeping items. During the presentation portion of this session, all participant microphones will be muted by the meeting host. If you have a question during the presentation, please submit your question using the chat button at the bottom of your screen. KDA staff will be monitoring the chat for questions to be asked at the conclusion of the presentation. And lastly, the session is being recorded and will be posted online later next week. At this time, I would like to introduce Dr. Sara Ford. Dr. Ford currently serves as the USDA Emergency Coordinator for Kansas. After graduating from the University of Minnesota College of Veterinary Medicine in 2016, she then served as the Public Health Officer in the U.S. Air Force for 4 years. She has extensive experience in risk communication, emergency management, and has worked on foreign animal diseases in several countries. Dr. Ford, welcome, and I'll now turn it over to you to share your presentation.
Thank you so much. Right. I am going to be presenting today on foot and mouth disease virus. Can someone confirm they can see my slides?
Yes, you're good.
Wonderful. So today I'm going to talk about foot and mouth disease virus, why you should care, how to recognize it, and how to help keep your farm safe. I'll start by giving an introduction of the disease. We will talk about the virus itself, who it affects, what animals it affects, and how it is spread. I'll discuss some examples of outbreaks that have affected large economies. I'm going to show you how to recognize it on your farm and who you should notify if you see any sick animals that may have this disease. Finally, I'll go over our current prevention measures, how the U.S. is gearing up to control an outbreak should it occur, and actionable items you can do to keep your livestock safe from foot and mouth disease. So let's begin with the virus itself. Foot and mouth disease is caused by a picornavirus, a very small, non-enveloped RNA virus. Its size is one of the key factors why this disease is spread so quickly. Foot and mouth disease has more than 7 different serotypes, with type O and type A predominating in the world today. Unfortunately, each serotype is unique and not cross-protective. This means an animal sick with type O today could still be infected by type A in the future. It also makes vaccination difficult, as each vaccine has to be developed according to the current serotype. Serotype A has many different strains and is the most difficult to develop vaccines for, while serotype Asia 1 is the least diverse. Foot and mouth disease is moderately hardy in the environment and can persist up to 3 months in wet and cool climates, especially on organic matter that is protected from sunlight, like used bedding, manure, or contaminated feed. The virus can survive in bones, glands, milk products, and meat. However, because it is killed with a pH lower than 6, the virus won't survive in meat after rigor mortis. This is especially important when we talk about control methods for the disease, because a carcass that has been depopulated already should not be a risk for disease transmission anymore. Foot and mouth disease affects almost all of our current domestic livestock and can infect all wild and domestic cloven-hooved animals or two-clawed animals. Cattle, pigs, sheep, and goats, and wild cervids or captive cervids can be infected and spread the disease. Other wildlife in North America that can be affected include bison, types of deer, and moose. Experimentally, camelids like alpacas and llamas and camels can be infected, but they seem to be more resistant to the disease than other cloven-hooved animals, and it hasn't been seen outside of a laboratory often. Foot and mouth disease does not affect horses, but horses housed on the same property as infected animals like cattle can help transport the virus mechanically, such as the wheel bed of a horse trailer when traveling to a show. Currently, foot and mouth disease is endemic throughout Africa and Asia, with the most recent outbreak occurring in Indonesia in May of 2022. This outbreak is still ongoing and is being controlled in a large part with a very large nationwide vaccination campaign. However, this has put Australia on high alert. They have increased port surveillance and ramped up education and outreach of their producers to help protect Australia from this disease. North America is currently free from foot and mouth disease without the use of vaccination. The United States eradicated the disease back in 1929 after several small outbreaks affected approximately 300,000 animals in the 1920s. Canada had its last outbreak in 1952 after the disease was mistaken for vesicular stomatitis, a similar looking disease. Mexico declared freedom in 1954 after a 7-year outbreak costing $250 million at the time, an estimated $2 billion today. South America has made great strides in eradication, with the World Organization for Animal Health recognizing an increase of 99% freedom in 2020. Venezuela is considered the last endemic area in the continent, with recent outbreaks in Colombia affected by the illegal border introductions along Venezuela border. Many countries are considered free with the help of vaccines in South America, and the goal of the subregion is to achieve eradication by 2025 and stop the use of vaccines. One of the most notable outbreaks in recent history occurred in the United States in 2001. It's believed the outbreak started at an abattoir in Essex when pigs were infected with contaminated meat. The disease was spread to at least 57 farms before the first case was confirmed foot and mouth disease positive. The outbreak lasted 8 months, with the last case occurring in September of 2001. The OIE, now the World Organization for Animal Health, recognized the United Kingdom as free from foot and mouth disease 4 months after the last case in January of 2002. Over 6 million animals were depopulated during these efforts for disease control and animal welfare. Over 2,000 premises were affected, and the outbreak spread to 3 other countries in the European Union, including France, the Netherlands, and Ireland. Direct costs to control the outbreak, including compensation to the affected farmers, was estimated at 2.7 billion pounds, with indirect costs topping almost 7 billion pounds from losses due to the agriculture sector and tourism. The economic impact from foot and mouth disease is devastating to newly infected countries and to countries trying to manage an endemic disease. Direct costs during an outbreak include compensation for the animals depopulated, loss of future production, and the costs associated with depopulation, disposal, cleaning, and disinfection of infected premises. The cost of vaccination in outbreaks or managing endemic disease is substantial. The largest economic impact is from indirect costs that are much more difficult to measure, with huge losses coming from trade, tourism, and consumer fear. If an outbreak were to occur in the United States, conservative estimates put the overall cost at $10 to $15 billion within the first year of an outbreak. Analysis of the current export and domestic commodity markets predict major losses in each livestock and product sector, with the pork industry being hit hardest due to their international exports. One of the leading reasons foot and mouth disease makes such a large economic impact on countries is the speed of transmission, or the spread of the disease between animals. Because almost all livestock species can be infected with the virus, there are many different ways it could be spread in an outbreak. In infected animals, the virus is shed or can be found in fluid from the blisters or vesicles the disease causes. It can also be found in saliva, urine, feces, semen, and milk. It is most often spread through direct contact or animal to animal, but it can also be spread through contaminated feed, especially swill or garbage feeding in pigs. Because the virus is so small, it can float on the air as an aerosol, infecting animals over 10 kilometers away. It can be spread indirectly through fomites or contaminated objects, such as boots, clothing, or vehicles that have touched infected animals or manure. Transmission rates are much higher during cool, wet weather months. And it's important to note this disease is not a human health risk and can't be passed from infected animals to their caretakers. Transmission also depends on the species of animals affected. We have three main categories listed that affect how quickly and how sneakily the disease can spread. Cattle are considered the indicator host. This means they are usually the first species to show clinical signs. They contract the disease easily and are very noticeably ill when they do develop the disease. Pigs are much harder to infect, but are considered amplifier hosts. This means when they do develop the disease, they produce massive amounts of virus that aerosolize into the air in huge virus clouds. They can infect many other animals within 10 kilometers if the wind conditions are right. Finally, sheep and goats are considered maintenance hosts. They hide in plain sight with minimal clinical signs. They may even appear completely normal. Even without looking ill, they can still spread the virus to other animals, usually through direct contact. After recovering from foot and mouth disease, all animals still have the ability to become a carrier. Sheep and goats can carry the virus for up to 6 months and still spread the disease without showing clinical signs. Cattle can be carriers and spread the disease for up to 3 years after recovery. Pigs are the most unlikely to be long-term carriers and can only carry the virus up to 28 days after recovery. Foot and mouth disease virus spreads so easily that almost 100% of the animals in an infected herd will show signs of being ill. After an animal has been infected, it typically takes 2 to 3 days to develop clinical signs of illness. This disease causes painful blisters called vesicles around the muzzle, in the mouth, on the tongue, and it causes massive saliva production. So you'll see drooling and chomping, especially in cattle. And most animals will show decreased feed and water consumption. Vesicles can also appear on the feet, causing lameness or reluctance to move. This is most often seen in pigs. Fever is usually present for 2 to 3 days and can cause a drop in milk production. This drop can be gradual or very dramatic and sudden. Many times, the milk production doesn't come back until the next lactation cycle. Foot and mouth disease can also cause abortions and can cause young death in animals due to heart disease. Cattle are the most common species to show signs of drooling. This is due to the blisters forming on the muzzle, inside the mouth, and along the gum line and dental pad, and on the tongue. You may also see discharge coming from the nose, which could be clear or white. Cattle may be seen chomping to relieve the pain, or they may be seen with their tongue sticking out from discomfort or swelling. This chomping is very different than rumination and usually occurs without any food present. So you can see in these pictures that all of the cattle are showing signs of very white, foamy drool, and that is, it's not green tinged or lined with any sort of food particles. Most of the cattle are very reluctant to eat at this point in time. The vesicles or blisters in the mouth in the first few days of the disease can be intact or still filled with fluid. They appear as raised lumps on the tongue or nose and are usually white or translucent with fluid inside. You can see on the picture on the left of a goat that they have very subtle signs, but on the tongue, you can see white, kind of blanching, rounded lumps. And if you would poke those, they would be filled with fluid. You can see similar signs on the bottom right corner of a cow with similar lesions on the tongue. See that white blanching and kind of the rounded edge of the tongue. It's very rare to see vesicles still intact inside the mouth because they are so prone to rupturing before you could see it. These are the signs of clinical disease that are only 1, possibly 2 days old. So this is the earliest that you could find signs of the disease in an animal. Here are more pictures of blisters that are still intact. You're much more likely to see intact blisters around the muzzle or nose of animals. On the upper left-hand corner, you can see a cow with several different vesicles of differing sizes that are labeled by the arrows. On the bottom left picture, this cow has a vesicular lesion above the dental pad on the gum line. And on the bottom right, we can see the same intact vesicles on the tongue of the cow that are now becoming multifocal, or a lot of different bumps that are almost coalescing or coming together and forming kind of irregularly shaped lumps. All of those would still be full of fluid if you poked into them. The clinical signs can vary, and the sizes of the vesicles can be either very small or very large. The upper right-hand picture shows a pig with a very small vesicle on the snout, but sometimes they can get quite large, up to 1 to 2 inches in diameter. Vesicles that have ruptured take on a very pink or red appearance, with the gum line or mucous membranes are eroded underneath. The edges of the vesicles can look sharp in appearance at first, or they can look more rounded or develop a yellow tissue that shows healing over top after 5 to 7 days. You can see the blisters can get quite large, like the area on the upper left picture of the cow. And that picture shows a very freshly ruptured vesicle. So this would be earlier in the course of disease and probably still maybe 3 days after the cow developed signs. You can see in the bottom picture of the pig and the top right-hand picture of the goat that these erosions are a little bit less red. They have a yellow tint coming on parts of it, and the edges look a little bit more rounded. So these are animals that have had the disease for a couple of more days than that cow. The blisters can also be seen on the teats and are easily ruptured during milking. You can see in the upper left and upper right-hand pictures some intact vesicles on cattle. And then that central picture shows a very good ruptured vesicle where you can see that bright red mucosa underneath that is, it has been eroded. The vesicles can also show up on the feet and are most often affecting the coronary band region, and especially between the interdigital spaces, causing extreme lameness. This can be very difficult to find during wet or muddy weather, and they are usually ruptured and very hard to find intact vesicles. You can see in the upper left-hand picture that both feet are affected. It shows a small, round, pinkish erosion between the interdigital space of the claws right around that coronary band. In the central picture, you can see that the lesions also can extend to the back of the coronary band around the bulb of the heel. And then finally, on the right-hand picture, This is a picture of a goat with a ruptured vesicle in between the interdigital space. And you can see that extra skin flap that used to be on top of the vesicle holding in the fluid. Lameness is the most common sign in pigs infected with foot and mouth disease. When the blisters rupture in pigs, you can sometimes see the entire claw slough off, and that is why it causes such extreme pain and reluctance to move in pigs. These pictures kind of show you the different stages of a disease. The bottom left-hand picture shows the beginnings of the disease. You can see a white blanching around the coronary band near the claw, and that's where the fluid is going to start building up. The fluid starts accumulating and pushing out the claw, and so you'll see in the upper pictures, the lesion or vesicle has now ruptured, and the claw is slowly coming away from the underlying hoop layer. On the right-hand side, this is very typical to see with pigs with foot and mouth disease, where there is a lot of tissue degradation, a lot of the tissue has come away from the claw, showing that really red underlying layer, and they can cause quite a bit of bleeding. So the first sign you might see is frank blood on your flooring. If you ever see blisters or vesicles on your livestock, it's important you contact your area veterinarian right away. You can also call the Kansas Department of Agriculture or the USDA area office directly to report any suspicious signs of illness. I've listed a map of our current area veterinarians, and it's always good to make contact with them before you ever suspect anything, just to establish a relationship and know who to talk to if there is a concern. It is extremely important that you contact your veterinarian to determine if the vesicles you are seeing on your livestock could be foot and mouth disease. All vesicular diseases look alike, and we have many diseases in the United States that can look like foot and mouth disease. In pigs, we are currently having an outbreak of Seneca Valley virus throughout the United States, even in Kansas, and it looks exactly like foot and mouth disease. In cattle, diseases like BVD and blue tongue can cause erosions in the mouth that look very similar to ruptured vesicles. Additionally, erosions in the mouth or feet can be from causes other than disease, such as chemical or thermal burns. Once you contact your area veterinarian, they will come out to do an investigation and take samples. These foreign animal disease diagnosticians have been specially trained to know what to look for, what samples to take, and how to reduce the spread of disease to protect your farm and your neighbors. All vesicle diseases look alike, so the samples must be taken to an approved lab for PCR testing. In Kansas, all of our samples are tested at the Kansas State Veterinary Diagnostic Laboratory in Manhattan, and confirmatory testing is done at the USDA Foreign Animal Disease Diagnostic Laboratory in Plum Island, New York. The USDA testing will soon be transitioning to the National Bio and Agro Defense Facility here in Manhattan, Kansas. There is no approved treatment in the United States, and our control of the disease centers around quarantines, movement controls, and a vaccination plan for large outbreaks. In endemic countries, there is still no treatment. It is considered a disease that you need to do supplementary treatment to get them through the issue. Many endemic countries decide to have extensive vaccination protocols to help control the disease locally. Our current foot and mouth disease free status in the United States is consistently being tested. For prevention, our border ports are hard at work watching for any live animals being imported with signs of illness or any illegal animal products trying to be brought into the country. In states where it is allowed, garbage or swill feeding to pigs must be heat treated before the pigs consume the product. Most importantly, we prohibit any live animals or animal products coming from foot and mouth disease affected countries. Additionally, the United States is conducting planning exercises to determine the best methods to control the disease spread should it occur. Exercising these plans helps stakeholders practice how they would control an outbreak on their farm or within their business. The secure food supply plans have been developed to help avoid interruptions in animal and animal product movement that are not infected with a disease to provide a healthy, continuous supply of food and products to consumers. Most important to our control is the fast detection of the disease. Any suspicious cases need to be investigated quickly to help stop the spread. Your help with reporting suspicious cases is one of our first lines of defense. If the United States were to get an outbreak of foot and mouth disease, quarantines and movement restrictions would be put into place immediately. This could involve a 72-hour national standstill or the restriction of movement of animals and animal products for 72 hours, and this will be covered in a future webinar. Animals infected with foot and mouth disease would be depopulated, and infected premises would need to be cleaned and disinfected. Vaccination could occur if the outbreak is very large. Vaccination is hard to accomplish quickly because the serotype would need to be determined and booster doses would be necessary. The vaccines themselves are very effective at limiting the spread of disease, but they are not 100% protective. This means an individual animal could still get the disease, but with much fewer clinical signs. Because there are fewer clinical signs, there will be less chance of spreading the disease to animals. Education will be key before, during, and after outbreaks to inform producers, stakeholders, and the general public about this disease, how to limit its spread, and how to recover. The prevention and control techniques that we use can make all the difference in an outbreak. Remember the outbreak from the United Kingdom. They had a second outbreak of foot and mouth disease in 2007, but used many lessons learned from the 2001 outbreak to better combat the spread of disease. In the 2001 outbreak, over 2,000 premises were infected, with at least 57 farms infected by the time the first case was confirmed. This is because the disease was reported to the area animal health department veterinarians around 3 weeks after likely onset of clinical signs. In the 2007 outbreak, only 8 premises were affected, and the disease was reported early, within 4 days of initial clinical signs. In 2001, the spread to over 2,000 premises occurred in part due to all of the movement of livestock across the country. The national movement ban wasn't introduced in the 2001 outbreak until 3 days after official disease confirmation. Whereas in the 2007 outbreak, the national movement ban was implemented within hours of confirmation results. The United Kingdom attributes strong leadership, improved contingency planning, and increased scientific testing capabilities as the cornerstones of their new response in 2007. Increased communication allowed early detection of the disease. An immediate national livestock movement ban after the first detection limited the disease spread to a small geographic area. Additionally, in 2007, a second national movement ban was implemented 1 month into the outbreak when the disease spread outside the original surveillance zone. This contributed to the successful stamping out of foot and mouth disease within 8 weeks of the first case. Finally, the United Kingdom established foot and mouth disease risk zones of high, medium, and low risk to speed up relaxation of movement restrictions. This helped allow continuity of business, allowing unaffected regions to be able to resume normal operations faster. This direct comparison within the same country highlights the need for early detection and limiting animal and animal product movement to help combat foot and mouth disease outbreaks. Finally, you can take actions right now to help protect your farm. Develop a farm biosecurity plan. There are many resources on the Secure Food Supply websites that can help, and the Kansas Department of Agriculture can also help you develop a plan to protect your farm against disease. If you are bringing new livestock onto your farm, make sure the new animals are isolated. You monitor them for signs of any illness before mixing them into your established herd. When working with sick animals, wash your hands and boots and change your clothes before handling well animals. Never feed pigs meat or other animal products. Have a good record of your movements on and off your farm. This can help you find places of vulnerability within your biosecurity plan. And most importantly, make sure you don't allow visitors, friends, or family members to come onto your farm if they have been in a foot and mouth disease infected country in the past week. I hope you now feel more informed and prepared to recognize and respond to the threat of foot and mouth disease. We learned it affects all cloven-hoofed animals and does not spread to horses or people. This is a disease that could devastate our economy by its fast spread and its impact to our domestic and international trade. It's a vesicular disease and causes blisters around the mouth and feet, and can only be diagnosed in a lab, not by sight alone. You can take meaningful steps to prevent the spread of disease by increasing your farm biosecurity and helping educate others so we can detect and stamp out the disease quickly should it occur. I want to thank you for your time and participation, and I'm going to turn it back over to Kelly for some questions.
Dr. Ford, thank you for that great information. Our KDA staff have been monitoring the chat, and we do have a few questions for you, but first I want to address the slides will be available through the recording on our website, and we won't have them able for you to download directly. So you'll have to get those off of the recording. But the first question that came in, can the virus spread to humans?
So, great question. No, the virus cannot spread to humans. It's not considered a zoonotic disease, and the virus can't be spread by you handling animals or by eating any meat or animal products.
Great. And next question is, why aren't we vaccinating livestock against FMD?
So that question has to do a lot with the different serotypes of foot and mouth disease. So there are the 7 different serotypes, which means realistically, if we were wanting to cover all foot and mouth disease in the world, we would need to vaccinate every animal with 7 different vaccines to cover all the different serotypes. Vaccinating with no presence of the disease in the United States is just not financially practical for our producers. And vaccinating for foot and mouth disease puts certain trade restrictions in place, like many of the countries in South America are facing right now. So our export and international trade would be limited, and some countries would not take our product if we started using the vaccine.
If any of our listeners have questions, feel free to put those in the chat at this time, or you can raise your hand and ask your question as well. So we'll leave it open for just a little bit. There is a lot of great information available on the virus at the Secure Food Supply website. Lots of YouTube videos and resources available for training employees, sharing with other industry organizations, all can be found on that Secure Food website. One more question. How can I improve my biosecurity on my property? We do have a lot of producers joining us today, so I think that's a great question that's been asked.
Yeah, that's great. So making sure that you have a farm biosecurity plan is first and foremost. If you don't have a plan in place, you and your workers won't know what to do in an emergency. I know I am very stressed in emergencies, and I never remember all the steps that I need to take. Having that plan gives you a step-by-step process of what should I be doing now and how should I change it in the future if an emergency happens. Some great resources to utilize. Again, the Kansas Department of Agriculture can help you tailor your biosecurity plan to your farm. And really great templates or places to start from scratch are found on the Secure Food Supply websites for each of those specific commodities.
Okay, one more question. You referenced we have to wait a week after visiting an infected area, but how long can the virus actually live on our clothes or on our self?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the virus doesn't live on clothing or items on us for very long. It does need organic matter to be able to survive. So the way it survives on clothes or vehicles is if there's actual food particles or manure particles that are on those items. And they can be pretty resistant if they're kept wet or they're in really cold climates. So again, technically they can last up to 3 months in really cold and snowy months if you never clean your boots or you never clean your vehicle. If you visit a foreign country, we usually recommend that you either bring footwear that you're not going to wear again here, or you make sure that you fully clean it, get every single bit of organic debris off of it. Bleach works really well. You can use other type of cleaning products as well to make sure that you're not bringing anything back. Normal laundering of your clothes will disinfect the virus, will inactivate it from your clothing. And if you're ever worried, we do recommend kind of a 5 to 7 day downtime, just because there are some random studies that have shown that it can kind of live within our nasal passages for a few days. It doesn't infect humans, it doesn't make us sick, but we can transport it with us. So if you're ever in an FMD affected country, the recommendation is don't go around any livestock for at least 5 to 7 days after you return.
Dr. Ford, what is the difference between a biosecurity plan and a secure food supply plan?
So a biosecurity plan just involves the prevention of disease going on and off your farm, whereas a secure food supply plan includes the biosecurity aspect, but also helps you as a producer figure out what other plans in place you need to have and able to move your animals and animal products safely during an emergency. It includes a lot of different aspects and is more of a whole system approach to your farm rather than just focusing on disease transmission.
Great questions have came in, and we'll just give it maybe one more minute or a few seconds to get any questions that they have in. And if you think of questions after the presentation today, feel free to reach out to me. My contact information was on the registration slide, and I can get those to Dr. Ford. I'm not seeing any more come in. So Dr. Ford, thank you for your time and expertise this afternoon. And participants, please mark your calendar for the next webinar that will take place on March 22nd from 11:30 to 12:30 p.m. Central Time. We will have Dr. Danelle Bickett-Whittle with Preventalytics present on why secure food supply plans and contingency planning is important. So look for registration information to come out the 1st of March. Thanks for joining us and have a great afternoon.